Hey guys, I recently made a satirical video about free speech and burning the Quran, and a lot of the comments got me thinking about moral relativism and human rights. Now, a lot of people who comment on my video are proponents of both human rights and moral relativism, and I think that has some interesting implications. But before we jump into that, I want to preface this with an experience that I had in one of my anthropology classes. In that class, we learned about how some tribes in Africa engage in female circumcision, which in some instances is really brutal. We also learned about a tribe in New Guinea that, because of a superstition that they have, was able to rationalize orally raping young males. So we learned about some pretty gross practices, but we also learned about ethnocentrism, which is the tendency to think of your group and your group's values as superior to other groups. And another thing that this class did was strongly promote moral relativism. Even in those extreme instances, like the tribes in Africa or New Guinea, the message at the end of the day was, morality is culturally relative. Therefore, we should not interfere with other cultures. And a lot of people bought into this. But the problem is that that position is self-refuting. It's the equivalent of saying, morality is culturally relative. Therefore, it is objectively immoral to interfere with other cultures. It's not possible for morality to be both culturally relative and for something to be objectively immoral. That's where the self-refutation comes in. It has to be reworded as, morality is culturally relative. Therefore, we ought to act in accordance with our culture's principles. And that implies that we should interfere with other cultures if and to the extent that is consistent with our group's values. But even this version leads to a paradox. Another claim of moral relativism is that no universal moral principles exist. And because saying you ought to act in accordance with group principles is a universal claim, moral relativism is again self-refuting. In my experience, most people who are relativists make one of those claims which would render moral relativism self-refuting. However, it is possible to be a consistent moral relativist, but you pretty much have to take the word should out of your vocabulary. The word would no longer have any meaning in a moral sense and would be limited strictly to use in a pragmatic sense. Now, there's a philosopher named Gilbert Harman who's a proponent of moral relativism. He's a professor of ethics and philosophy of the mind, and in one of his writings called Moral Relativism Defended, he provides what I think are some interesting insights. When talking about a group of enemies, he says, "We will judge that they are dreadful enemies, to be repelled and even destroyed, not that they should not act as they do." And in reference to cannibals, he says, "We may call them savages, but we will not say that they ought not to have eaten their captive." When it comes to something like human rights or freedom of speech, I am not hearing people merely call its opponents savages, or merely express the desire and willingness to defend it. Many of us certainly are doing those things, but we seem to be going further than that. Claims like, no government, even our own, should suppress that freedom, or Islamic values and laws should not be imposed upon us, are commonplace. Those claims are not consistent with moral relativism, yet it appears that there are several moral relativists who make such claims. Now, if you are a moral relativist, hopefully this gives you something to think about. And regardless of what position you actually take, I think we can all benefit from getting more people together to think and talk about this topic. That being said, I'd appreciate your feedback. Now, if you want this video to be seen or critiqued by more people, be sure to click the like button. And as always, test everything, hold on to the good.